Hello and welcome to Link Ahead, the City of Dublin podcast. Today, our guest is a true embodiment of a Dubliner who loves her city, treasures its history, and continues to give back in multiple ways.
That's right. City Council Member Amy Kramb, welcome to Link Ahead.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, you have served in our city before council on boards and commissions. You are an attorney and a professional architectural historian with a business here in Dublin, and we'll get more into that later. But let's begin with your upbringing in Dublin. Talk about growing up here.
So I'm third generation Dubliner. My great-grandparents purchased acreage along Riverside Drive in the early 1900s. And then my grandmother married and built a house on that acreage in the 50s. And then my mother married and built another house on the property in the early 70s. So I have been there since the early 70s. And I can tell you, Dublin looks very different today than it did. You know, I guess most of my memories would be from the early 80s, and there wasn't much here in the 80s. We actually had to travel to Upper Arlington or downtown Columbus to go to the grocery store and to do shopping for back to school. It was very different.
Right. So you talked about how different it is. In your opinion, how has Dublin managed to grow in the right way?
I would say we were very fortunate to have excellent governance. Especially our former leaders had the foresight to establish different land use policies and plans for the future. All these preserved trees and the green space and all of our parks, and that's all attributed to them.
Yeah, that's the one thing that, it doesn't matter if we have a council member or a city employee or somebody that's just visiting Dublin. They always talk about how well planned we are. Like there was this blueprint and we stuck to it, and, we don't build roadways and then come back in 5 years and say, hey, we need to make this wider. Sorry, everybody. We seem to always have the plan for that.
I hear the same thing, and I think that is the answer as to why we're so well planned today.
So in 2008, you began volunteering with the city. Tell us about that experience and then your subsequent volunteer experiences after that.
2008 seems like a long time ago. So at the time, I was in my early 30s and I had a young toddler. It was the right timing. My kid was starting to grow up. I was bringing a new generation into Dublin. I said, well, I should probably get involved in my community that I've lived here my whole life. And so I think the timing was just right. I also had I went back to school as an adult, went to law school. So I had just graduated from law school with an interest in kind of land use and planning. So I saw the applications for Planning and Zoning Commission and applied, and I really had no idea what I was getting myself into.
Now, looking back, was that the beginning of your commitment to service in Dublin?
Oh, definitely. I served 7 years on that board, and so that was definitely the start of it.
Wow.
So tell our listeners more about what the Planning and Zoning Commission does and what's its purpose.
So the Planning and Zoning Commission, they're responsible for, I would call it, our built environment. So pretty much everything you see in Dublin, that aesthetic look that is Dublin, is attributed to our Planning and Zoning Commission. They're watching every little detail of every new development. I mean, from air conditioning units to dumpsters, the tiny stuff to the big stuff. It's a very, I would say, labor-intensive volunteer position.
You're not really selling it,
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. When I see the runtime of those meetings after the fact, I'm like, was that a 3-hour meeting?
Oh, yeah.
So then after planning and zoning, you spent 2 years on the Dublin Architecture Review Board. So similar question. Can you tell us more about that board?
So that board has a smaller scope than the Planning and Zoning Commission. They look at things only within the historic district, so kind of our traditional downtown historic Dublin. But they also look at all of the details of every development. They just have a smaller geographical footprint that they're covering. And they also have to consider the historic properties and keeping that historic feel.
So was it a natural progression then for you to run for city council?
Yeah, I think it was because, well, when you're on planning and zoning, you touch a lot of aspects of the city. And, after serving, 9 years, on boards and commissions, you start to see little things in the city that you become interested in, wanting to see the bigger picture.
Sure.
And so I think that's why it was a good progression.
That's awesome. So we recruit people all year round to serve on boards, commissions, committees. What's your elevator speech on getting people committed to that kind of community service?
So I would say we really need residents to step up and serve. Our boards and commissions can only be as diverse in age and gender and race as our applicants allow. So, and each board and commission requires a different level of time commitment and different skills. So we are always in need of all types of people with all different backgrounds and experiences. So I would just suggest people go out to our website, read about the different boards and commissions, attend some meetings, find which one fits you.
And you're super impressive, an attorney and an architect, but you don't have to be. You don't have
check a
to
lot
be
of boxes.
that involved or that educated. I mean, it takes all types.
It
right?
does take all types, yes.
So have you actively recruited people and been like, hey, come here, let's have a little talk?
I have. There are a few people on our current boards and commissions that I prodded a little to put applications in.
See, that's great right there, face to face.
All right. Well, let's dive into your professional experience. You are a professional architectural historian. Tell us more about that.
So first, I'll say I am not an architect.
Okay.
So what I do is the history of architecture.
There you
Okay.
go.
So I don't actually design the buildings, but I can tell you the whole history of those
Okay.
buildings.
All right.
So,
That totally makes sense.
so in short, I get paid to decide if a building, actually, I would say any above ground resource is historic, meaning can you place it on the National Register of Historic Places? And so it's not just buildings. It could be, I'd look at bridges, factories, monuments, sites, cemeteries, battlefields. So
we should take you on a trip and then you can tell us what everything is,
Yes.
basically.
So I'm actually certified to say if it is eligible for the National Register.
Wow.
Actually, sounds like a really cool
That
job.
does sound like a cool job.
It's a very unique job.
You can
that's
just
for
say what
sure.
people did instead of saying, hey, here's how you should do it. So you really have a passion for architecture, history, the law, civics. What was it that drew you into this? Was it like a trip on a historic city, a book you read, a history teacher in school?
I would say actually kind of by accident. I went to Ohio State. I started taking classes. I really enjoyed classes in history and anthropology. And so I ended up getting a double major in those subjects. And back in the day, we still use the yellow pages. And I literally, right before graduation, opened the yellow pages to archaeology. And there were 2 companies in Columbus, and I called up both of them.
Really?
So I ended up getting a job at a local, they're called cultural resource firm, doing archaeology and historical research, like right after college.
That is awesome.
Our younger listeners
Yes.
have no idea what she's talking
Right.
about, Bruce. What
That
are
is
these
so
yellow
funny.
pages?
I know
that you
exactly what
speak
she's
of?
talking about, all right?
Or,
I live
you know,
that.
You could have same equivalent to maybe a Google search for archaeology in Columbus,
Right,
Ohio. Right?
absolutely. Well, no surprise here. You are a member of the Dublin Historical Society, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary and opening a new Dublin History Museum. So tell us a little bit about the society and why people should check out the new museum.
So, as you said, 50th anniversary. So it was founded in 1986, right as Dublin was becoming a city. We were growing. I was in elementary school at that time. Well, almost middle school. So obviously I was not involved, but I did get involved about, it's probably been 6 or 7 years ago. I was asked actually by the president at the time. They were trying to find younger people to get involved in the
There you go.
Historical
Yeah.
Society. And that was kind of my mission, to try to help bring some more people into the fold of a younger generation. And it's been great. I served as vice president for a couple years before joining council, and then I stepped off the board and when I got on council, but I stay actively involved. And yeah, the Dublin History Museum will be located at 35 South High Street. It is just south of the Dublin Village Tavern in historic Dublin. And the grand opening is Saturday, October 19th. We're going to be cutting the ribbon at 10 o'clock with a lot of the original founding members of the society. Will be in attendance. And we welcome everyone to come out and visit the museum.
I mean, I think that's super important, especially like you're talking about, the Dublin is not the Dublin it is now, but it's so important to pay attention to history or else we're going to make the same mistakes. So I'm glad that, they're putting this together.
And the new museum is wonderful in that it talks about Dublin's history from the beginnings, which has been out there. That information has been
Sure.
out and about, but it takes it up through the 90s. So for the younger generation, what happened in the 80s is history now. And it's it's embracing that more modern history as well.
That's awesome. So we should mention you're not just a local powerhouse, you're statewide. An appointee by the governor. And for 10 years now, you've served as the Ohio Historic Site Preservation Advisory Board. So tell us about this work.
So this is a board of, it's a combination of professional members, and then we do have some public members. And what we do is we review all of the applications for sites in the state that want to be listed on the National Register. And we review them, and then we make a recommendation and send them off to the Secretary of Interior for nomination. I've seen a lot of sites over the last 10 years get placed on the National Register.
That's awesome. So what kind of properties get that kind of approval?
We see a wide variety. One of the really common ones is old downtown factories and buildings that people want to renovate into condos. That's kind of, and get the historic tax credits for.
Okay.
That's been a real common one. But there are some really fascinating ones, like a sunken ship up in, we have an archaeological site, a sunken ship up in Lake Erie.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, it is a wide variety of sites.
Well, tell us a little bit more about this sunken ship in Lake Erie.
So there was a ship in the 1800s that sunk off the coast of Cleveland. It actually was a boiler exploded and it sunk. So it is sitting there just off the shore, and it's being preserved in place. And you can take scuba diving expeditions to go see it.
Now, when you approved this, did you have to go down there? Did you see? How
we
does that work?
unfortunately did not get to go,
Oh,
but
man.
we did get to see video of it.
Okay.
So they took video and presented that as part of the application.
Wow.
Ohio has a lot of historic sites. I think we are currently third in the country, just behind Massachusetts.
Wow,
Or
that's incredible.
we might even be second. We are really close with Massachusetts. New York is the top, and so we have over 4,000 sites on the National Register here. Massachusetts has a little over 4,000. We're really neck and neck with them, and then there's over 6,000 in New York.
Wow.
Well, speaking of historic sites, earlier this year, I saw you speak at the Brown Harris Cemetery dedication. What a wonderful event that was. And this was a cemetery that was rediscovered a few years ago, underwent years of careful restoration, and now is marked with a monument for its significance and importance to Dublin's history. You were involved with the project from the very beginning. Tell us how you got involved, and then give our listeners just a little more of the backstory. It was so fascinating.
I was serving as vice president of the Historical Society at the time, and so I was asked to be the liaison from the society to this project. So that's how I got involved. And it was very interesting because it's the type of work I do on a professional basis.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I was very familiar with it. And I knew all the parties involved doing all the research. And the site was rediscovered after kind of being lost. There were no tombstones, so they didn't really know it was there. And after the archaeological investigations, they realized there's over 20 individuals that are buried there. And they, date back to the 1830s and 1840s, and they were all freed slaves who owned that land themselves. So it was just amazing.
Now, you worked on this for years and had descendants of Harris Brown families there at the dedication. Can you describe a few of those moments with the descendants?
So first of all, I'm going to say my line of work when we discover cemeteries, a lot of times the first and only thing people do is avoid them. So it is extremely rare. Usually people avoid it or change their plans and just leave it in place. So it's actually extremely rare for a jurisdiction to restore a cemetery and create a sacred place for ancestors and the public. So what I enjoyed the most was seeing they had 3 generations of descendants in attendance. And they were just so thankful of the respect and honor that their ancestors were given. It was amazing. And they were involved in the entire process. They were the ones who decided what the monument would look like and how we would restore the cemetery.
Wow.
Well, as we start to wrap it up with your work on City Council, how do you view this type of public service to our residents?
An honor to serve, first of all. I just think we need people to step up and be willing to serve. Someone has to be willing to make those decisions and also just to oversee the day-to-day. For many years, I was not involved in the what's happening in our city. So I feel like I'm putting my time in, and then I'm honored to be selected to oversee the city and hope someone else will take my place in the future.
What are your top priorities that you bring to council?
I think number one is just continuing to keep Dublin the well-planned and well-executed city that it is, ensuring, our residents continue to feel safe and welcome and engaged, especially as we continue to grow. My favorite thing about this city is we keep getting bigger, but it still feels like a small town.
Yep.
Oh, what do you think are Dublin's biggest challenges?
Balancing the different pressures from the Central Ohio region in general, as, people are wanting to increase housing and keep up with growth rates, and also just balancing in the environmental needs and demands as technologies change and people's expectations change. I think just also coordinating with the school system is another challenge and important thing, because although we're two separate entities,
Sure.
we are very entwined.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and not only are we two separate entities, the school district is about twice the size of what the city boundaries are. And a lot of people don't really understand the difference there. So it is a challenge.
Yeah, stop by City Hall or attend the council meetings the second and fourth every, the rest.
Nice plug, Bruce.
Well, hey, someone's got to play council. All right, so as we wrap up all our episodes with rapid fire questions, so we know you're ready. We're just going to dive right in.
Okay.
If you could invite 3 historians to dinner, living or past, who would they be?
Okay, I'm tempted to say people everyone most would know.
Okay,
But
all right.
I'm going to go with, I think, Arthur Schlesinger, I think you pronounce it, Gene Edward Smith, and Ron Chernow. They're probably, no one on this podcast has ever heard of any of them.
Wait,
Maybe
I'll
Ron
look them
Chernow.
up.
He does write some more like bestseller type work.
Follow-up question to that. What would you serve them at this dinner that's traditionally Dublin, Ohio, or both?
Oh, does like Ohio craft beer count?
Oh, yeah.
Love it.
There we go.
Nice. All right, you know Dublin as well as anyone. How would you describe it to a complete stranger who's never even heard of our city?
That is a really tough question. And I'm going to kind of give an abstract answer and just say home. Because,
Love it.
Even when people go away, people have left and gone to school or moved because of a job, they always return. They always call it home.
Well, and it's funny, and I know it's rapid fire, but when people come to our office and say, hey, we need a photo that represents Dublin, I'm like, a photo? Because we can do a collage all day long. Because there's not just one thing that represents Dublin.
Yeah.
I love that answer at home.
No, but we do have a tagline, Dublin is home.
Thank you
So
very much.
you pretty much nailed it there. Okay, I'm really excited to hear your answer to this one. What is a guilty pleasure? Maybe the upcoming season of Dancing with the Stars, TikTok videos? What is it?
Actually, any Hallmark romantic comedy. And so, Countdown to Christmas Hallmark starts early and earlier each year. It's starting in October now. So
I love it.
I will watch every single one of them.
How long till they just have Hallmark Halloween movies? I mean, they could start this a lot earlier.
Have them
I could see the
They have them by
pumpkin patch.
season.
Oh,
They
my.
do have a fall series.
That is interesting. All right, book you're reading right now.
I actually just finished a newly released biography called Reagan, His Life and Legend by Max Root.
What's your favorite park in Dublin?
Thaddeus Kashiko?
I thought you might say that.
Yes. Yes.
Nice. A great Saturday night in Dublin begins where and ends where?
Honestly, it's usually my couch.
I thought she was going to say home at my house. Yeah. both places.
Yes.
Oh. All right. Well, Councilmember Kramb, thank you so much for your dedication to service and to our city.
Well, thank you for having me. This has definitely been an educational experience.
For us, for
us as
sure.
well.
Yeah. And to our listeners, thank you as well for taking the time to connect with your city. Tune in next time as we continue to explore the many personalities and experiences that make Dublin a thriving place to live, work, and grow.